Yes, this is unique. This is special. Do you know why? The interviewer and the great personality we have with us both have the same surname. See that, Hosi? We're getting this. This is the Simon applause. We were going to get Paul Simon, but unfortunately he couldn't be here. He might be a little bit too old for us. But the point is, this is the first time ever at All That Matters that it's been a Simon show.
We promised Jasper we'd start a band tonight, right?
We're going to start a band tonight.
Let's do it. The
Simple
ready.
Simons.
Well, okay.
Not quite. Okay. Well, Hosi, first of all, a great welcome to you to All That Matters. It is such a privilege to have yourself and Vice represented here, because Vice and what Vice has been doing creatively has got such important relevance for the All That Matters audience and the All That Matters APAC audience all over Asia. So what I want to do is a kind of start, because there might be some people in the audience that are not wholly familiar with Vice.
Right.
Vice was co-founded by a Canadian by the name of Shane Smith, who had a certain vision about the kind of media and material and television he wanted to make. Just give us a sense of the sense of Vice.
Well, I mean, I have a video to show in a second, which I'll call in a second, which will explain much better than I can. But, you know, Vice is generally considered to be, you know, the most trusted youth media brand in the world, or we think we are, we try to be. And at the very basis of what Vice does, we try to tell stories that the mainstream media or others won't tell in a way that makes sense for young people. It's in the voice of young people. We distribute our content widely through all sorts of partnerships, through HBO in the US and from there around the world. We have a partnership with A&E in the US for 24-hour TV network. We, of course, work with Facebook, Google, Snapchat, all the great platforms, OTT platforms, mobile, all across the world. But let's watch that video real quick, and then things will make a lot more sense.
Okay, Dickie and Anne, can we, let's roll the video clip.
Shane Smith is here. He is the co-founder and CEO of the international media company Vice. He wants Vice to be the next CNN, the next ESPN, and the next MTV digitally. You've also said you want to be the Time Warner of the street.
We already are the Time Warner of the street.
Vice magazine, which started in Montreal in 1994, it's become a global empire. You got Vice.com, international network of digital channels, TV production studio, a record label, an in-house creative services agency. Describe the Vice brand. What is it?
Vice is the voice of a generation. The world's first truly global, multi-platform youth media company. Vice delivers hours of original video content every day, covering the news, culture, and entertainment that define the world we live in.
Everyone was investing platform, money into platform, but no one was saying, well, what are we going to fill that pipe with?
Vice is a network of channels, each geared to the passions and culture of young people today. Vice.com is the global portal to all of these exciting channels, covering topics from music, technology, food.
It's linguine with black garlic and chili. It sort of tastes like an Italian-ish mee goreng.
Art, fashion, women's experience.
Some chicks doing DIY.
And sports. To gaming, health, finance, social justice, and more. Viceland is quickly spreading its signature brand of culture and entertainment across the globe.
It's unbelievable.
With channels in Europe, Latin America, Africa, and Asia.
Oh my Lord.
Through deep support from partnerships with YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Snapchat, mobile platforms, and hundreds of partner websites, Vice is creating the best original content for every screen and platform, reaching hundreds of millions of young people every month.
Young people today have been marketed to since they were newborns. They've developed the most sophisticated bullshit detectors of all time. And the only way to circumvent that bullshit detector is to not bullshit. The people who shoot it have to be young. The people who cut it have to be young. The hosts have to be young. So if something is created in a boardroom, it will not work.
Vice and its growing network of channels is defining the future of entertainment and news for young people everywhere.
There's a changing of the guard every generation in media, and we are the changing of the guard for Gen Y.
All right.
Hosi, so just looking at the video, the guy with the grey beard and who spoke about Vice is not made in the boardrooms, that's Shane Smith.
That's right.
So tell us a little bit about Shane. He's obviously a very cool guy, likes taking risks. He likes having a good time. And so for people who are not familiar with Vice, from that particular clip, can you give us a little more of a sensibility of why and what you want to be able to do with regard to Asia Pacific, APAC, and why you think that Vice is now positioned such that it will attract not only the attention, but the wonder of watchers here in Asia?
Lots of questions in there. Okay.
Okay.
Shane's a very nice guy. I'm sure you'll all meet him at some point. You should have a drink with him. He's one of the most loyal, most interesting people you ever meet, who's running this company in a way. He's involved, one of the very, very few people in this world who can run a content company and make the best pieces of content himself as a host. And, he edits all the HBO pieces, all the news pieces, as well as, of course, run the company from a business perspective. So it's incredibly impressive working with him, and I'm fortunate enough to have been his friend since I moved to New York 23 years ago by now. So Asia, for us, I want to start off and sort of say there is no such thing as Vice, as Asia for Vice, right? We consider Asia to be a very disconnected, culturally extremely diverse. We don't consider it as a region. We don't have an Asia strategy. We don't have an APAC strategy. We look at each of these different territories here and try to create local media companies in each of them over the next few years. The footprint of what we have in Asia right now is, we launched a company in China, Vice China in 2010. We launched Japan, Vice Japan in 2012, very, very successful. We launched Vice Australia, Vice New Zealand in 2003, so it's been a while with offices there.
They were your first markets in Asia Pacific and Australasia.
Right, but again, it's not particularly difficult to launch an English language media company in Australia.
Right.
And I don't mean this disrespectfully, of course. And then last but not least, right now we launched a company in Jakarta, Vice Indonesia, which is just about a year old, and Mo's in the audience who runs it, and that's been incredibly successful. And the next one up for us is Vice India.
Vice India.
Correct, and that's coming in a few months. And I specifically say Vice India, right? We're not launching Vice in India. We're not here to bring Vice to Asia or bring Vice to a specific country. We're launching local media companies that are driven by what young people in each of these countries care about, what they want to hear about, what keeps them up at night, what agitates them, what excites them, and describes their aspirations. So in each of the countries that we're launching in, our approach is to do about 50% local content, and then the other 50% are, the best of global content that we bring into a territory that it is. But we're not here to do licensing agreements, licensing deals, to have conversations about bringing our content to a territory. We're here to talk about creating local content, speak about things that are highly nuanced, super deeply rooted in a culture, where the youth development is in each of the countries, and then very significantly, first and foremost, again, start these local media companies and then take that content and bring it to the rest of the world. Because the heart of Vice really is, or why I think we are successful, is because we understand global culture, global trends, local diversity better than any other media company. And again, I say this humbly, not arrogantly, because we're totally connected into the 35, 40 territories that we operate in on a daily basis. We speak to them on a daily basis. I certainly do. I have everyone's cell phone number. We're totally connected. So the type of story you might get out of Indonesia is of the same quality as you would get it out of the rest of the world,
right?
And we watch it. I talked to Mo. He's here today. Of course, you'll meet him.
Is he here in the audience?
He's wearing all black, but he has.
Where is he? Is he here in the audience? Where is he?
So I can't see.
Not there?
He is here. I was with him earlier. The content he's making in Indonesia is incredible, right? It's and some of the documentaries he's made from an Indonesian point, we then run on television in the UK, run on television in the US, and all of our digital channels globally, and they're doing extremely well, because ultimately, like when you think of Western youth, right, or anyone in the West really, they have no idea what is happening in what young people in most of the territories here and most of the cultures here care about, right? Like when you really think about what the type of news you get about China, Japan, maybe you get some cultural news out of Japan, but most territories it's a geopolitical story, or China is described as an economic powerhouse. Nobody in America or in the West talks about China as a cultural powerhouse, as something where young people are creating incredibly interesting things on a daily basis. It's just this money story. And what Vice is trying to do is like really create stories within China, within Japan, within Indonesia, and the Philippines, and all over Asia, and soon to be in India, that are deeply rooted again in what young people, when I say young people, is 16 to 34, what they care about in each of these countries, and then bring that to the rest of the world and educate, for lack of a better word, the kid in Brooklyn, the kid in Sao Paulo, the kid in London, about what actually is interesting in these territories.
Did you say educate or educate? Because it's very edgy.
I did say educate, but that's
the same thing.
I'm not a school teacher, so that's why I was trying to correct myself.
But
educate.
Educate. But the thing is this: when you look at Asia Pacific, the online video market is worth $46 billion.
That's right.
And 60% of the world's youth are basically in this region. Does that also act as a driver for you?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think I've been coming to Asia, very generally speaking, since 1996. So it's been a while for me. I don't know all parts of it. So we're here to learn. I don't proclaim to know the region or know everything about it. I'm just trying to do the best we can, like we always do at Vice, and hopefully it cross our fingers and hopefully it works out, and usually it does if we just keep working at it. Of course we think it's a huge opportunity. We think it's a huge opportunity commercially. We think it's a huge opportunity from an audience growth perspective, because as you said, 60% of the world's young people live, again, very generally speaking, in this region. But I always say I think most important, it's a cultural opportunity, which I just described, right? It's people do not understand what happens on the ground here, what keeps young people up at night.
So let me give you an example. Indonesia, what subjects that you've covered have had some kind of impact at in terms of your programming?
Yeah, I mean, a good example is what I always use as a great example is skateboarding in China, right? It's so simple, right? But we've done a lot of coverage on what young skateboarders in China do,
right?
And obviously that's hugely popular around the world. And these are some of the best performing videos globally for us.
Really?
It's so simple, right? Sometimes you don't really have to overthink it, but because nobody understands the skateboarder around the world
culture
doesn't think they're skateboarding in China, and we're just describing it, and people usually say holy fuck, that's why I come to Vice. Excuse me, that's why I come to Vice to watch that, or I want to go to China and meet these guys and go skate. The skate spot looks great. It's very, very simple, and it's sometimes about what sort of what connects with people.
So you've made a decision to go to India.
Right.
And when you were looking at doing something for, with, and in India, you'd obviously have to choose partners that understand the culture of Vice and understand the edginess of the education it brings. So who have you chosen to work with in India?
Well, so in India, we're doing a partnership with the Times of India, which of course is one of the most established, well, it's been around for 200 years, most powerful, most trusted media companies in that market. And the way we look at India is very, very different than I think other media.
They're different to Indonesia, for example.
Yeah, I mean, certainly, because, okay, there's a couple of things. Like, again, from a Western perspective, from a superficial perspective, people say, like, well, it's got to be easy to make things in India because you have 750 million cell phones. Everybody read the Ernst & Young report and things like they know about India.
Yeah.
And like you make a piece of content, so hundreds of millions of people must watch it because there's 1.3 billion of them as per the latest count. But that's fundamentally incorrect, right? Then I think a lot of people look at India and say, like, well, why bother? It's not it's a drop in the bucket commercially. Like, what's the point? Well, the point is, we happen to believe that whatever happens in India over the next 1, 2, 3, 4 years will have a profound effect on the rest of the world, on how young people consume content, how young people communicate, the type of content they consume, as well as the whole next wave of the internet is about to happen in India. Right, so we're not approaching India as a going after the classic India 1 market of English-speaking, Western-educated English-speaking elites that may know Vice from around the world and of a higher economic status. I'm going to say I don't care about that segment of the population. Of course, they're more than welcome to consume our Vice content. I'm not arguing with that. And that's the same for all markets around here where there's a huge young population kind of rising up, getting free data, getting phones, getting on the internet through their phones. It's like that's the moment I want to hit with Vice. Like, what is that 18 to 24-year-old kid in India, who maybe can't even read or write or doesn't bother, can't really type into their phone and have voice-activated search and is looking for video. When I look at India and lots of the other markets around here, that video revolution that Vice has been at the forefront of hasn't happened. So we believe...
So would you say the same thing in the Philippines, in Vietnam, Cambodia,
Indonesia,
Malaysia, Singapore?
Of course, I think all of these, without comparing these countries culturally or throwing them in the same bucket in any way, shape, or form, would never do that, right? To like make them one.
Right.
But that's the trend that you're seeing, or this large segment of the youth population that is just about to come online through their phones and have free data and be exposed to companies like Vice or the video content we make, that is a very similar trend. So what we going to learn in India, or the work that Mo is doing in Indonesia, that is very applicable to any sort of similar young person. And
so India's got all of these different languages.
Right.
What language medium are you going to look at your programming for a country as large as India?
Yeah, so I mean, again, to my point earlier about Asia not being a coherent region, India isn't even a country. I mean, hold up, I shouldn't go on the record saying India isn't a country. Of course, India is a country, but within it, you have 28 different regions, languages, very, very diverse cultural areas that don't even consider themselves as one. Right? So the two, I should have said this earlier, what we're launching in India is a 24-hour TV network where we're launching a channel called Vice, which will be a pay TV channel. And then launching all of our digital channels, as well as our agency offering called Virtue, so to work with some of the brands we work with globally around the world. So we're launching that all together. And
so when we talk about the TV channel and the digital channels, what would the digital channels be different to the TV offering?
Right, so we're going to bring our global Viceland and HBO content to the TV channel.
Right.
Some of the stuff we don't run on TV, we're going to run digitally. And then the studio that we're building in Mumbai, that will create, we estimate we're going to do about 200 local hours in year one of local Indian content, right? Some of that will run on TV, some of that will run on our digital channels, social channels, and of course for any sort of SVOD or third-party OTT offering, we work with mobile partners we have in India as well.
And so with the Times of India, obviously I've chosen them to work with them. Are they hip to the trip, or do they
That's exactly what they say every day. They're hip to the trip.
They're hip to the trip.
Hip to the trip. Yeah, they're really excited. I mean, they're fantastic partners. It's like in the beginning, it's you know, everybody here does partnerships all the time, and like India, it's incredible the amount of influence and power they have, and history they have,
Absolutely.
relationships they have in India. So we're excited to be able to accelerate this type of business in no time. And I do want to describe a little bit what we're trying to do here with Vice. Right? Again, we're not here to launch the Vice, you know, from America or from the UK or from Europe in Asia. Right? We're not here to replicate the kind of company we built over 22 years in the US. We're here to build local media companies that may take on very, very different forms than what you're used to from the US. All we're doing is we're creating the best possible content we can that is the most locally relevant and then globally relevant from somewhere. And you know, we're not here to do a website, a TV channel, an agency business, a distribution thing. Like, it can take on very, very different forms. And the way, you know, we want the Vice brand here in each of the territories to be very, very elastic, right? I want it to be younger. I want it to be different. We describe it, I want it to be weird. Like,
weird.
Weird is an actual term we use all the time because we think it's very good. I want us to be like back home in New York and in the headquarters to be like challenged by it. Because when you really look at Asia, particularly places like Japan have always been at the forefront about how media is consumed, how young people consume media, technology is happening. It was always outpacing the rest of the world. Of course, that has swung back in some ways, but we consider this region to be, we want to be highly experimental, look at things in a different way, not take no for an answer, like look at deals, partnerships, stories in a different way, story formats in a different way that may not yet be recognizable in the US, where somebody might say like, what the fuck is that? Like, I don't get that.
Right.
And that's exactly what I want.
Right.
Because we're here for the long term, and ultimately, we believe that the most dominant youth culture trends, and by youth culture trends, I count everything from technological trends to how content is consumed, fashion, music, food, all of these things. We believe the most dominant form of those will come out of this region.
It's interesting you say that, because in that clip that you showed, there's one character, he's got a beard, he's got a lot of tattoos, he's a great chef.
Shane. No.
No, not Shane.
Action Bronson.
Action Bronson. Fantastic guy. He's got a global following. Does anyone here know about Action Bronson? Yes, there are a couple of people that do. But so when you set up in a local market like you're doing in India, what kind of structure are you going to have?
So, you know, again, we're looking at the company a little bit differently, right? So when you look at Vice in the US, you go like, okay, there's a website, there's a digital channel, there's a TV network, and there's an agency, and then our distribution partners, if you will. But we're really looking at what we're forming here is, think of it as a studio at the center of it, right? How can I find anyone from within the company, like put them together and be like, you are all responsible for finding the best, most relevant stories we possibly can.
And weird.
And weird. And then from there they go, okay, this might be for a website, this might be for a Snapchat channel, this might be for a local OTT partner, this might be an SVOD channel, this might be for our TV channel. Like really flip the company on its head and allow ourselves to be way more flexible and be development driven, story driven again, rather than like, you know, platform driven, right? So if you truly want to become multi-platform, like ultimately, like, you know, it's just the story that matters, and then you go into everything else.
Right.
And then really push ourselves, and you know, we've talked about this in the rest of the world, like, you know, we've just entered into the scripted formats and stuff like that. So do a lot of that different type of formats that you might not yet be used to from Vice in this region as well.
So you'd mentioned skateboarding in China, and obviously the objective is India's the first step, China, Indonesia, actually second, 3 steps. You will be looking at these other markets. You will be looking at the Philippines. You will be looking at other territories in Asia. I mean, your Asia Pac strategy is an unfolding one that will basically be built to the growing audience that is here.
Yeah, I mean, you know, we're here. We will be here for the long term. You know, it's not surprising. This is why everybody is at this conference. I'm extremely excited to be here at the conference, to meet tons of people. And every time I come here, I leave I mean, inspired is such a lame word, but I feel inspired.
Right? Of course. It's incredible like, area.
It's what inspires me about here, coming out here, is this sort of relentless optimism people have. You talk to young people or like people in the industry, people are just excited about the future. They feel in control of the future. They feel like something is about to happen here.
And do you get the sense that there's the same hunger for the Vice type of content that you really established when you were in the other international markets, that people are really looking for an alternative to, not their parents' television, but they want something that's got much more of a relevance, contextual relevance, challenge to them?
Yeah, I think so. Like, look, if you look back at what we've built in the US, like, people have always told us we're going to fail. You always told us you can't do that. You can't go into news. Young people don't watch the news. Young people don't care about this. Well, they do. They just don't care about the news and the way they're presented to them, for example. And when you think of how Vice became successful, when it truly became successful is when it provided the voice, the media company, the stories for that moment when young people realized, when that sort of generational shift of power happened, when young people realized like they can't blame the parents, they can't blame the media, they can't blame the corporations, the systems, all that kind of stuff. It was on them. It's on them, right? And Vice was in the territories where it worked the best, provided that voice in many ways, agitated that moment, was accompanying that moment. I think again, very generally speaking, in Asia, that moment hasn't happened in most places.
And also, of course, twinning it with a really strong online presence in the different configurations that you had mentioned.
Exactly, and if we can, if we get it right, and hopefully we will get it right, that moment when that generational shift of power happened, when information is transferred to young people, again, in a place like India, Indonesia, China, of course, it'll be transformative. It'll be transformative for each of these territories themselves, but it'll be transformative for the rest of the world. And I believe that, again, the young people and older people in the rest of the world, they just don't know what's about to hit them culturally, right? Because this part of the world will be feeding the rest of the world in a way we've never seen it before. It's true by numbers, but it's really like the kind of culture, the kind of creativity, the kind of things that are currently happening here on the ground are totally unexplored, and I hope that Vice can play a very, very big role in bringing that to the rest of the world.
So you're working with a guy called Sanjeev Shah at the Times Group?
Yes.
Bennett and Coleman, the overarching company. Some might say they're very straight, but they're very adventurous, and they like to do things that are cool online. Edge, Kate. Been good to work with so far?
Excellent. And then we work with the Times Internet group within it, with Satyan.
He heads up the online group?
Times Internet, and then Sanjeev, and then Vineet, one of the brothers, is sort of the key team that we work with.
So this is also a great opportunity for program makers, storytellers, to seek you out, you to seek them out, to really come up with really cool, weird, important, contextually relevant stuff.
Yeah, I mean, look, we're open for business, right? Like we're work with some of the largest brands around the world. We're going to be working with some of these brands, and this is now consumer brands that we work with in the rest of the world. We're going to be working with them here across the region, and then the thing that we protect the most is our brand, of course, and that sort of brand halo, because what that means is the best
brand
people,
halo, great phrase.
What that means is the best people, the best creative talent, which is ultimately all I care about, or we care about, is interested in working for Vice, because that means we'll be successful because we'll have content, and we'll go we'll have established a bigger and bigger presence here in the region. We'll be coming to more territories, of course. There maybe even is some discussion around potentially setting up shop, setting up a headquarter here, like looking at different kind of places here. Obviously, Singapore could be interesting, Tokyo is interesting, Hong Kong is interesting. If anyone has any ideas, they should come talk to me about that.
You'll get a lot of people, I can tell you that.
I usually just judge it by food, and so I kind of know where I want to be.
Well,
so we'll see.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is just a fascinating way of looking at establishing a media business. I'm so glad that All That Matters has brought this to you and to the world and the people that are watching online. And what we can say for sure, Hosi, the two Simons, is this: Vice is nice. Ladies and gentlemen, give Hosi a great big round of applause. Fantastic.
Thank you.
What a great company.
Thank you.
We love it.
Thank you very much.
Stay weird.
I am weird.
We're weird. Thank you.
Thank you very much for having me.